Dana White is clearly manufacturing his next big star. Bo Nickal, despite this being his third UFC fight ever in his career, is already apparently main card material for UFC 300 as he is slated to open up the main card of the biggest event of the year. His fight with Cody Brundage has taken a main card spot over fights that could easily be the co-main to a major card or can simply be the main event of a pretty good fight night. We're talking Jiri Prochazka versus Alexander Rakic, which should be an absolute pick'em at 205, the underrated fight of Calvin Kattar versus Aljamain Sterling, where we can finally see Aljo at a reasonable weight class for his body. We also have an absolute banger of a fight in Figgy versus Cody Garbrandt, which is not only absent from the main card, but absent from the prelim card as well, as it's set to open the entire UFC 300 card on the early prelims. And yeah, I've heard the reasoning as to why it's so low on the card. Dana wants people to watch this thing from start to finish, so having such an amazing fight that opens up the card forces people to tune in to the very first fight. But this still doesn't take away from the fact that two former champions, exciting champions at that, are on the early prelims, while Bo Nickal in his third fight in the UFC is fighting Cody Brundage, who is 4-4 in the promotion on the main card of such a stacked event. Additionally, Bo Nickal was originally going to be positioned above one of the most anticipated fights on the card period, with Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan originally slated to open up the main card until thankfully Dana came to his senses and switched up the order. And everybody knows the placement of Bo on the main card is undeserving. I thought this was very interesting, but Kevin Iole did a poll where fans ranked their favorite fights on UFC 300, and again, despite fights like Jiri versus Rakic, Figgy versus Garbrandt, and Calvin Kattar versus Aljo ranked well above Bo Nickal and Cody Brundage, they apparently are going to open up the main card over all of those fights. So let's get into how Dana White intends to manufacture his star in Bo Nickal, why Bo Nickal is receiving Dana White privilege, and ultimately what makes a fighter receive star treatment and what makes a fighter have to truly earn it. And of course, speaking of UFC 300, a word from my friends at DraftKings. Hey fight fans, we've got a big weekend coming up with UFC 300 right around the corner. With matchups set to make history in the octagon, this is the one you do not want to miss. I've teamed up with DraftKings Sportsbook to bring you closer to the action. Right now, all new customers who bet $5 will get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings app now and sign up using my code TJ Loves Fights. The crown is yours. That's right, new customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. If sports betting is not available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have a shot to win cash prizes. So again, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use promo code TJ Loves Fights and bet just $5 on any wager and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code TJ Loves Fights only at DraftKings Sportsbook. So let's start in the beginning of Bo Nickal's career. Bo Nickal is probably best known for his collegiate wrestling days and was one of the biggest American college wrestling stars ever. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't really follow college wrestling, but from what I could gather from my wrestling friends was that he was the talk of the town in college and is highly decorated. On the NCAA D1 level, he won silver at 174 in 2016, won gold at 184 in 2017 and 18, and then gold again, this time at 197 in 2019. So literally every year of his collegiate career, he was practically at the top of the division, which is ludicrous. Additionally, he has an overall record of 120-3 and at one point was on a 68-match winning streak. So yeah, he was pretty good at wrestling. After going through the 2020 US Olympic trials and ultimately losing his spot to David Taylor, Bo made his transition to MMA. Bo Nickal made his MMA debut in Jorge Masvidal's promotion or event or whatever you want to call it at Icon FC 3 and won in about half a minute as he landed a giant left hand and followed it up with another left and a jab, immediately displaying to the MMA world that he also had power on top of his wrestling. This performance would earn him a shot at competing in Dana White's Contender Series, and he would build a streak of fast finishes. First, he would have an amazing display of transitions as he opened up his fight against Zachary Borrego with a double leg, then switched to a deep guillotine as Borrego tried to get back up, quickly got the back of Borrego as he went down, and secured the rear naked choke. In his next and last fight in the Contender Series, Bo faced Donovan Beard and showed his power, again dropping Beard with a giant left hand immediately mounted, and when they flipped over, Bo quickly got the triangle and finished, with all of this happening in less than a minute. We would then run into a bit of controversy in Bo's next fight, as against Jamie Pickett, as he went to finish an early takedown attempt that brought this fight to the cage. It looked like Bo kneed Pickett low, which may have brought this fight to the ground. Pickett briefly got back up, but Bo was able to use a darts to bring things back down, transitioned to getting Pickett's back to attack a rear naked choke, and eventually got this via arm triangle. Bo probably would have eventually gotten this fight to the ground and got the submission, but this was definitely a small asterisk on the fight. And now we finally get into Bo's most recent fight, where this time he reminded us of his tremendous power. He opened his fight with Val Woodburn with a couple straight left hands and eventually caught Woodburn with a devastating right hook and followed those up with a straight left and an eventual left uppercut to seal the deal. And from watching his fights, though there's less than a combined 5 minutes of material, you can tell that Bo Nickal is the real deal. His wrestling, especially the speed of his transitions, is absolutely incredible to watch, and he has devastating power to knock out guys afraid of his wrestling. And though this is at no fault of his own, with Dana forcefully pushing Bo towards front and center stage this early, it doesn't matter how good Bo is projected to be, it just leaves a sour taste in the mouths of UFC fans, since Bo is taking the spots of fighters who have earned it. I've talked about this problem before in my Dana White privilege video, but in summary, because the UFC is both the promotion and the matchmakers, they can and will make the biggest fights possible, even if certain people don't necessarily deserve those fights. And on the flip side, even if a fighter has earned a big fight, if they're not as promotable as other fighters, they could be starved out of a big fight they have earned. With this in mind, Dana will always strategically place Bo Nickal on the main card of huge cards to get more face time for Bo Nickal. Of course, Bo's first time on an actual UFC card had to be on the main card of the biggest card of that year, which was Jon Jones' return. That was a huge pay-per-view success. His second fight would be on the main card of another great card that featured Volk's return to 145 to unite the belts with Yair. And of course, we have Bo Nickal on probably the UFC's biggest stage of the year, opening up the main card, and will definitely have a lot of eyes on him. Additionally, with the highly favorable matchup for Bo, this is a layup for him to have a huge performance in front of the biggest audience of the year. And in fact, he's been a historically gigantic favorite against all the guys he has faced, further showing that Dana and the UFC are trying to manufacture a star. And I understand that all great fighters have to go through the bottom tier guys to prove they're really as good as they say, but putting one of these fights on the main card of UFC 300 is absurd. And it's clear that Bo Nickal has been graced with Dana White privilege because Dana wants to tap into the collegiate wrestling audience. Again, Bo Nickal was a gigantic star in college wrestling, especially from 2017 to 2019, where he won back to back to back. Having a star like that transfer into the UFC is huge, as it brings in a whole nother market to the table. And obviously, this isn't the first time that Dana has tried to capture a new untapped audience. Speaking of wrestling, historically, Dana has always tried to bring in the WWE audience. Brock Lesnar is probably one of the first fighters with insane levels of Dana White privilege. Brock captured the UFC heavyweight belt in just his third fight in the UFC, even after losing his debut to Frank Mir. Additionally, when Brock Lesnar made his return for UFC 200, he was exempt from USADA testing by the UFC, even after his time in the WWE, where he was definitely on the juice and was later confirmed to be juiced to the gills shortly after his fight with Mark Hunt. CM Punk is another quote-unquote professional wrestler that had the worst case of Dana White privilege, as he made his MMA debut on the main card of UFC 203 and got ran through by Mickey Gall. Despite being a wrestler, he clearly did not have any grappling and got rear naked choked in about 2 minutes. And even after this performance, he still got a main card appearance in his next fight in UFC 225 and was even on the main posters, and again lost, but technically this got overruled because his opponent tested positive for marijuana. The thrill and storyline of seeing whether a star from another sport, if you can even call it that, can successfully transition into MMA is such an easy storyline to promote and will immediately get that person Dana White privilege. If Gordon Ryan were to ever decide to compete in the UFC, I guarantee you he would get a main card fight tomorrow against a striker with absolutely no grappling. In conclusion, Bo Nickal is a great talent in the division, no doubt. His wrestling is elite, he has power to KO practically anyone in the division, but with his forceful and manufactured rise from Dana and without a step up in competition, I feel like the way he is being promoted is doing the opposite effect to fans. Bo Nickal seems to be in the headlines and titles of videos because of his undeserving spots on big cards rather than his talent. And so long as the UFC is both the matchmakers and the promotion, they'll always use their ability to matchmake to try to promote fighters that they think will be stars, instead of keeping it a pure meritocracy where the guys who have earned it earn the big fights. But what do you guys think about Bo Nickal? Do you like him? Do you hate him? What would you rate him? Is he someone that you still want to see fight? Or is he someone who has insane amount of Dana White privilege? Again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.